life for myself because everything that had gone before had ended. So I've been doing a lot of work as a social entrepreneur, I suppose, is the technical term that you guys would understand, or a lot of people use because they love putting you in a box, you know, you've got to do stuff, you know. You can be crazy, but I need to know why you're crazy. Okay, you're a social entrepreneur, that was cool, well, that one will fly. And all the community groups that I used to deal with in Leicester and Leicestershire, it was always about, John, we're running this event, but we can't get in the mainstream media, no one's interested, you know, we'll contact Radio Leicester and they never get back to us and stuff, but there's a very good reason for that when you know how Radio Leicester works, okay? So that's really weird. You know, when you know how the system works, you can use the system to get the coverage you want. Same with the mainstream, the Mercury and things like that. Can you help us? And I suddenly realised what there was here was this opportunity to set up a professional community news agency, okay? Now, by professional, most people think, I get a salary. No, I don't. Get a big car? No, I don't. We have a big office? No, we don't. Yeah, we were professional in the fact that we took seriously what community news was to the communities that wanted to get that information out there. So what we've done after 3 years with Citizens Eye is created a community news agency that covers Leicester and Leicestershire for individuals or groups of faith or no faith, a demographic group, LGBT, disabilities, young people, old people, or a geographic area. That can be an inner city estate base or a market town, yeah, in a very tight geographic area, to be able to share all their news, events and information and training, and we're looking for space, I've got a room to rent out, that kind of stuff. And what we found was by having it as a website, no one could take it off me. Okay, so you can imagine after 2 bankruptcies I was quite keen to hold on to anything that I did next. And got it to the point where when we started getting being on Radio Leicester with Rupert Rajani, you know, from day one really as Citizens Eye, yeah, from Citizens Eye, contacted by Radio 4, who were investigating a refugee and asylum seeker story, and then being contacted by, like, you know, followed on Twitter by Guardian Local, and doing stuff with the local Leicester Mercury. We realised that what we were doing is we were just taking this news that lots of people were generating, putting it in one location so it was easier for them to find. There's no advertising on it, so we'll come down to things like advertising and the survival of hyperlocal sites later on if you want to. But then people could find it. So now what was happening is, in Leicester, you've got the Leicester Mercury, BBC Radio Leicester, all of these other community things, and Citizens Eye has risen up and now sits up there as an acknowledged route of finding your information. Okay, purely by accident. Okay, we'd have between 600 regular visitors a day.
Purely by accident?
Well, purely by accident as in just being in the right place at the right time, rather than being any kind of desire to kind of build a community news agency. It was something I stumbled across, and I've used it by then realising that people wanted to do these things and then bringing them all together, because everyone involved in it is a volunteer. Okay, so what you've then got is we've got 15 other news agencies under Citizens Eye, but all of which are issue specific. So we've got one for disability, one for mental health, one for photography, and they're all driven by volunteers that have a desire or have a particular need to be involved in that particular project, and then they then benefit from Citizens Eye and all of its training.
So is it that quality that makes it rising?
I think so, yeah. It's the fact that we did something with it rather than we weren't campaigning, we weren't shouting, we weren't trying to be disruptive, you know. And then when I say to people like, you know, John, are you against the man? You know what I mean? The man being the mainstream media. But when you then say, like, as we're here today, Stuart will know, you know, I sent a text earlier from one of my community reporters saying, our regular community news cafe we run in the iCross, you know, here's a picture of everyone sitting around the table and they're still doing it without me there because they're running it themselves. But then at 11 o'clock we're using BBC Radio Leicester's training room to run our second photography course. But I've got 6 desks in the Mercury, I've got 6 desks in the newsroom, you know, and my volunteer reporters go in there and we create the news and we have a page every week in the Mercury. So we're inside the man, you know what I mean? We're not against the man, we're actually inside the man. Because the way you're going to bring about change is by working with the mainstream media. You make them realise there is value in what you do. Now what always surprises me is when you speak to what I would call traditional journalists who are over a certain age, And I remember a very interesting conversation with the guy who runs all the facilities at BBC Radio Leicester called Stephen Butt. You know, he said, John, this is like in the old days, or Tony Wadsworth, this is like in the old days when we used to ring people up and go, well, tell me what's going on out there then. You know, and they had community reporters, you know, so it's always existed. You know, the Kirby Muxloe Messenger from 1898 was citizens' journalism. You know, why? Because it wasn't a mainstream newspaper. And I think what we love to do as a society, isn't it? You know, you've got the charitable sector, the voluntary sector, then it's the third sector, now it's the big society. These things have always been here. And then what happens is, because it's the big society, everyone's trying to set up new projects or kind of buy into that. You know, and what we've done really over the last sort of 3.5, nearly 4 years is just constantly just built it up by actually delivering. So when people say to me, how many people look at Citizens Eye, I go, well, on an average day, between 600 and 1,000, if we've broken a particular story, it might go up to 1,600, 1,900. And they'll go, oh, that's not many. They go, yeah, but it was never driven by how many people that looked at the site every day. It was driven on, if you went to the site, it was useful to you and your community. And if you weren't on there, you could go, I want to be on there like the 15 members of the Russian community that came yesterday. They've known about Citizens Eye, but they were ready to engage yesterday to be able to help themselves.
John, who's asking that question? As in numbers, who's asking that question? Is it people who want to benefit from that? Or?
No, all the people that want to be able to understand what you do, understand the concept, and then monetise it. Okay.
So it is those who are looking to make a gain.
Absolutely, yeah. And
Are
we'll
you,
touch
are
on.
you, are you being as open with them as you are with everybody else?
Absolutely.
Open source,
Yeah.
so they can.
The only currency I have is my reputation. You know,
So
considering what my past was.
what's
So now
stopping
it's
them
all about
from-
putting it out there for people to understand.
What's stopping them from taking that and using it for their own gains, their own?
Because I think it's very much, they can duplicate what we do, but they're not prepared to put the time in by going out and actually finding people out in the community and talking to them. They're expecting people to find them. And the way the community media is now operating, it's about there has to be some value in it for you to be able to be involved. And that value for you might be you're helping yourself, you're helping your community, you're a community leader, you want to set up an alternative voice for your community other than the usual suspects that only ever write that newsletter. So we have a real big thing in Leicester with the African Caribbean community that sees itself as fourth-class citizens. Yeah? And a lot of the people that want to change that perception about that community are doing things around where they want to set up alternative reporting systems for their community, internally and externally, and how they communicate about their community, yeah, than the ones that exist already, because they're run by the usual suspects who are quite happy to be consulted every time we do a community cohesion strategy. They'll speak to those people, but they don't represent that community. So we're trying to encourage people to have an alternative voice, but not then be seen as troublemakers, that they can come and we can build them a blog in an hour. Why do you want a website?
But how do you avoid the usual suspects taking over?
Because they're not interested in actually going out and speaking to the people. They're quite happy to be the people that represent that community with like, I don't want to get political, with like 10% of the vote or 10% of the support. So what happens then is you've got all the apathy and the people that aren't interested, but there's lots of people out there who want to have an alternative but don't understand how they can use a simple blog or a newsletter to be able to get themselves to have a voice. And by being involved in Citizens Eye, because Citizens Eye is not about taking their voice and then saying this is what we think we're doing or what you're about, we give them a bit of structure and a bit of an umbrella in which to thrive and generate. And then what happens is, we were saying this to Stuart earlier when we had a coffee, what happens is you find someone who's got a disability and someone who's a refugee and asylum seeker, and then someone who's got a mental health issue, yeah, and then someone over here who's a young person. What they suddenly realise when they come together for a community news cafe is they've all got the same issues. Yeah. So what happens then is there's actually a lot of common ground between these people. Then the reason where you're from, how you live your life, how old you are, and what your sexual orientation, your ethnicity is just the things that make us different. You know, all the things that are used to keep us apart are the reasons we all come together. Okay? So, bit of an overview. Before I dive into this, I just want to show you the DVD.